Thanks for being here. It had been reported late last year that you had implied that you would potentially leave the office of governor if the initiative petition on abortion passed. I was curious your take on that and if that still holds up.
Well, I didn't imply that, and I encourage anyone who wants to go back and look at the video. What I was speaking to was I have a problem with elected officials that take an oath of office, and then when they get into office, they say, oh, I can't do that, so it's going to cost the taxpayer more money. I believe you take that oath of office and you have to fulfill that office. If you can't fulfill that office, then of course you'd resign, but I never intimated or said anything that I would resign under that. And of course, if the abortion initiative gets passed, I hope it does not, then I will spend my time fighting to turn back the clock and make sure that we protect all Americans, children, mothers, everyone in this state.
What would that entail if the voters, again, let's hypothetically, if they pass a constitutional amendment that reverses this near total abortion ban, what would an Ashcroft push to reinstate or tweak those rules look like?
I think you would see constitutional amendments then being put before the people to protect life in this state. Look, 51 years ago, the United States Supreme Court said that it's okay to kill a child in the womb. And a lot of people said, well, that's decided. A lot of good people said, no, we're going to do what we can to protect all life in this country, and they've had success. If we're forced to start over again after November this year, I will lead that fight in Missouri.
As Secretary of State, you have a say ultimately in what gets on the ballot following the law. You have until Tuesday, August 6th, on primary day, to certify the initiative petitions. What does the progress look like so far? Because there are a number, not just the abortion measure, a number that have come to your office with counties, as of our recording right now, still submitting. What's it look like?
The counties are moving through it. I think we will hit that August 6th deadline. The deadline is actually 2 weeks after the election authorities are done checking the signatures, or August 6th, whichever is later. Hopefully, we will get all those signatures checked and be able to let people know more quickly, but we need to make sure we get it right.
Does it look like abortion will be on in November? Supporters say they have more than twice the signatures.
I don't want to put my thumb down on the scale right in my official capacity. After all those signatures are turned in by the election authorities, we will go through and we'll check them and validate to make sure things are done correctly. If they have enough, they'll get their certificate of sufficiency. If they don't, they'll get a certificate of insufficiency.
And let's say it does happen and it's there and you make it through the primaries. What then? Is there going to be a push from Ashcroft Camp to try to get people to the polls for two reasons, for you? And
there already has been a push. I've already been working with Missouri Right to Life and with other organizations to make sure that the truth gets out about what that amendment would do. That amendment is not just about allowing abortion in this state. It is about making sure that there cannot be any regulations to protect the health or safety of a mother that's undergoing an abortion. It is about making sure that no matter how badly hurt or scarred or even killed a woman might be when someone performs an abortion on her, that individual that performed the abortion cannot be held liable. That is not female friendly. That is not woman friendly. I don't think that represents what the people of this state want.
Do you support abortion in cases of rape or incest?
Look, I believe we need to make Missouri the state where every mother knows whatever she's going through, she has a tremendous future and that her child can have a tremendous future also.
Yes or no?
Do you believe that people that were conceived through incest are lesser people?
I'm asking you the question.
I'm asking you
too. Do
you believe that people that were conceived through rape are not real people? That's what I'm asking you because that's inherent in your question.
No, I'm just asking because
the
candidates have been
Would you answer? Look,
forthcoming
I believe that we need to protect life. I've been endorsed by Missouri Right to Life, and I find it repugnant that you think that someone, just because they were conceived through rape, is not an individual
made
in the image of God. Well, I know people that were conceived through rape. Sure. I know people that were conceived through incest, and they deserve the right to life just like anyone else does.
Does a mother deserve a choice in that case of rape or incest? Well, let me word it that way.
There are two individuals we're talking about.
Okay.
And by saying that it's just about the mother, you're saying that that child doesn't matter if they were conceived through rape or incest, and I think that's deplorable.
You mentioned restrictions on abortion. You say that there would not be regulations. There are strict federal regulations and medical regulations in place. You went to court over the wording of the ballot language for this petition, and when you had written that there were that these were unregulated, unrestricted abortions.
They would be unregulated under that constitutional amendment, and the people that proposed that amendment couldn't even name one health regulation, one regulation designed to protect the health of a mother undergoing an abortion that would be legal under that constitutional amendment.
Even with federal
But the
Regulations,
individuals that
self-regulations.
brought that couldn't even name one. Look, I don't understand what your agenda is, but I'd really appreciate it if this would be about making sure that people know what they're going to vote on so they can make their own decision.
There's no agenda here. I just want to get
clearly you
want
do
to get
have
your
one.
point on the issues here.
Clearly you do have one.
No, I do not. Just trying to get your opinion on the issues
Well,
here.
I've been
Let's
very,
talk about.
I've been very upfront about where I feel on these issues. I think the language that I wrote was truthful and honest. It's unfortunate that the Missouri courts decided that they would mislead the people of this state on that. I would invite every Missourian to read the actual language of the proposed constitutional amendment.
We talk about campaign ads, and nowadays especially, they run like national campaigns, either supporting former President Trump or otherwise, depending on the party, and competing over maybe who supports him more. You and your top two opponents now have the endorsement of the former president. What do those ads tell me about what you're going to tackle for the Missouri voter head on?
Well, I have been very forthright about talking about making sure parents are in charge of education, putting out a plan to do that. I've been very forthright about talking about what we need to do on public safety. I've been very forthright about an economic plan. In fact, I'm the only candidate running for governor that actually have policy positions that are fleshed out, not just buzzwords, but I put out what I call my red print. We continue to roll out new parts of that. Anyone who wants to see what I believe in and what I want to do as governor, that's on my website.
You've talked about, you and your opponents have talked about getting rid of the state income tax in Missouri.
Well, and I'm the only one that's actually put forth a plan to do that.
Tell us about it.
I'm glad that they've started talking about that after I started talking about that. But, you know, I've been working with Grover Norquist with Americans for Tax Reform, been working with Stephen Moore, the Heritage Foundation, been working with Dr. Art Laffer and others, some Missouri economists and elsewhere about how we take Missouri from having an individual income tax to having no individual income tax. We can do that 6 years, 8 years. Best way to look at it is the state government budget has increased by over $20 billion over the last 6 years. The individual income tax in our state, I've been saying $8.5 billion, but I think it actually brought in 8.2 after returns last year, is less than half of that. That just shows that we're wasting money, that we're taking in more money than we need. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem, and it's time we get that under control.
How long, you've said this wouldn't happen overnight, admittedly. But
Unfortunately, I can't just snap my fingers because I think everybody would love that.
how long do you think it would take realistically?
Well, I just said 6 to 8 years.
Okay. This would be the biggest reorganization of government finances in Missouri's history.
Well, it's just a start.
Right.
We not
I was
only
gonna say,
have to
what
stop
goes
the
from here?
tax cuts, we also have to look at what are we actually spending our money on. What is it that government should be doing? We need to get away from really just saying we're going to have a baseline budget that we're going to increase every several years. Instead, we ought to look at what do we really need. Let's have a zero budgeting baseline that we start with, saying they don't need any, and then you have to prove what you need. We need to focus on what are the core responsibilities of government. That's what we should be spending general revenue on. You know, the lieutenant governor pushed the largest tax increase in the history of the state with a gas tax 3 years ago when our state had billions of dollars that was sitting to the side that they didn't know what to spend it on. Roads, bridges, inland waterways, education, and public safety are core responsibilities of government. Our general revenue should be going to that before we're just raising taxes willy-nilly on the people. Americans and Missourians more specifically, it's hard for them. They're trying to make ends meet. They're having to not enroll their kids in sports or take them to camps or take family vacations because of the cost of gas, because of the cost of food. Why does government keep growing bigger at the expense of the people of this state?
How would this affect education in the state? And what do you think the role of government is in education statewide?
I think the best thing to do with education is to take the money that currently is going directly to schools for children and put those into what I would call a real education savings account, like a health savings account, and let parents control where that money goes. If that local public school is a good school and the right school for their child, to just go ahead and send that money on through as tuition to that school. But if parents want to homeschool, parents know their children better than the government bureaucracy ever can. They should be able to use those funds for homeschooling. They should be able to use those funds for private schooling. They should be able to say, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, they're all different. We should be able to make sure that the education provisioning that they're getting meets their children. The state doesn't do that well. We see that fewer than 25% of Missouri 8th graders are proficient in both math and reading. That's unconscionable. We should put parents in charge. We see it happening in Iowa. We see it happening in Arkansas, where we had a governor that was willing to lead. We see it in Arizona and Florida and other states. That's how we do it. We put parents in charge. And the corollary of that is, not only does it help educate children, not only does it give parents the ability to make sure their children are educated and being taught the right values, but it empowers teachers. Because when parents are working directly with teachers, right now, if you're a teacher, you have to go to the school, you have to deal with whatever they want because the school has the money, the school has the student. But when parents can choose, that teacher, just like someone that sells insurance will have their book of sales, they'll have their students. They can go to that school and say, these 20, 25 kids, if you're not providing the way I need you to, if you're not making sure the resources get to the classroom, if you're not making sure we have good discipline in this school, I'm taking these kids elsewhere. They're going to follow me. And that's what we need. We need to empower teachers. They've spent their lives wanting to teach, learning to teach. We need to let them do that.
Devil's advocate, what happens to, let's say, a public school system if that happens and too many kids jump ship?
Are we worried about the public school system, or are we worried about teaching kids?
That's what I mean, but in
No,
a public school system.
I'm asking you, what are you worried about?
No, I'm
Educating
saying,
children or that building over there?
If people in the city, if people who can't afford to, potentially to go to a private school, want to stay in this district and
under this policy, everyone will be able, if they choose, to send their child to a private school. So that's a misnomer to say that they won't be able to. This would allow everyone. We have school choice in Missouri right now. Mm-hmm. The problem is we only have school choice, well, generally for people that look like me and people that have money. That's wrong. We should provide that to every Missourian. Every mom, every dad in this state should know that they can make sure their child not only gets a, quote, good education, but gets a challenging education, an education that matches up with their child and prepares that child for the best possible future.
All right, let's move on to gun violence. It's a huge problem, especially in Kansas City, St. Louis, but
Are there a
across
bunch
Missouri
of guns
as well.
just going around shooting people, or is this really just violence that people are causing and they tend to use a gun?
It's a little bit of both, isn't it?
There are guns just running around shooting people?
No.
Okay, well, then why do you call it gun violence?
People are being killed with guns in Kansas City
People
at an
are being
alarming
killed
rate.
by other people that use guns.
You say the gun doesn't enter into it at all. If someone has
I'm pretty sure
if someone has a
an
22 pistol, that's different than an AR-15 necessarily on the streets of Kansas City. So my question is,
well, both of those are deadly. Both of those should be treated as deadly weapons. Anyone that knows anything about guns knows whether it's a 22 or a 38 or a 308. You don't point it at something that you don't expect to kill. You don't act like it's unloaded. You always assume that it's loaded. I mean,
sure.
Yes, both of those firearms should be treated in the same way.
Regardless,
but the idea that it's firearms killing people, it's people killing people using a firearm. I mean, it's just, let's be honest, it's an inanimate object.
People are dying because of people using these inanimate objects.
That's work.
How do you curb that in Missouri?
Well, the one thing we need to do is we need to lock up criminals. We look at what's been happening over on the St. Louis side. It's always kind of fun to make fun of St. Louis when I'm in Kansas City and vice versa. But when you had a prosecutor that was refusing to lock up criminals, what we've found is when you prosecute criminals and when you lock them up, crime goes down. That's the solution. What we're finding when you look at this, people killing other people with guns, generally speaking, those are criminals that are doing that. They don't obey the law in the first place. So taking away the ability of law-abiding citizens to be able to defend themselves only makes them defenseless and better prey for criminals. That's not the right solution.
You've talked about wanting to bring St. Louis police back under state control.
Yes.
Kansas City is under state control right now. There's been a growing desire in KC to change that, and I mean, it's been this way for a century in Kansas City.
And to defund the police.
Well, I believe they went to court.
I've been
the city
sued
did
multiple times by the mayor because he doesn't want to have to spend the amount of money that the legislature and that the people of this state voted to require him to spend on policing.
City of Kansas City pays more than 25% of their general
and
revenue.
And yet they
right
went
now.
to court to make sure they wouldn't have to spend that much.
Yeah,
They want to make sure they can defund the police. That's the wrong thing for the people of Kansas City. The people of Kansas City, and I believe it's a core responsibility of government to provide for public safety.
Sure. Do you believe that people in Kansas City are competent enough to run their own police department?
I believe that the citizens of Kansas City are wonderful. I have real questions about the government of the city of Kansas City.
All right. There's been a big issue here in town as of late, and that's sports teams.
Yeah.
Chiefs and Royals.
And the Royals have been doing a lot better than we've seen lately.
It has been encouraging to see, yes, for sure. Governor Mike Parson has been playing an active role in trying to keep the team in Missouri. We've seen lawmakers across the state line in Kansas pass star bonds issues. Where do you stand on this? From what I understand, you say no state funding should go into keeping
I
these
agree.
teams, right?
I don't like the idea of government reaching into your pocket to give to some billionaire sports owner. I don't think that's the right role of government. But beyond that, it doesn't work. Look at St. Louis. They used to have a pro basketball team. They don't. They gave them subsidies. They still left. They used to have the St. Louis Cardinals football team. They got state subsidies. Oh, they're still gone. They used to have the St. Louis Rams. They paid a ton to bring that team to St. Louis and to keep them in St. Louis, and yet they went to LA. Here's what we need to do. We need to have a state that creates an environment where people and teams and companies want to be. We need to be a state of vitality. We do that by prioritizing education. We do that by prioritizing public safety, and we do that by cutting taxes. Get rid of our state individual income tax, get rid of the gas tax, and teams will want to be here because Missouri will be a destination state.
If they jump ship before that happens, what would you do?
Well, they've got
as
7 years on their lease.
Sure, but they are planning ahead. I mean, the Royals this year were trying to get that going well ahead of that 7-year deadline so they can move the transition. What would you do if one or both teams says, you know what, that star bond over there in KCK looks pretty tempting to me?
I will continue to put the welfare of the people above the welfare of wealthy sports owners.
You mentioned talking about just locking people up and locking violent criminals up. Crime is another issue that you were mentioning too. What else is in your crime plan?
Well, when you look at what we did, we've put out a plan to get 1,000 new officers on the street in the first year. A small portion of that will be people that are trained in Missouri. A large portion of that will be changing laws to make sure we're attracting law enforcement individuals from other states where they're not supported, where they don't have the resources they need. We did do legislation a year and a half ago. We presented that. We'll rework that legislation that would have given us truth in sentencing, so when people do the crime, they actually do the time. We had legislation that would make sure that we could get special prosecutors appointed. If prosecutors were not willing to prosecute crimes, we'll go ahead and amend that to make sure that if prosecutors are not willing to do their job, they will get removed from office, so taxpayer dollars aren't going to pay a prosecutor that's refusing to do their job. There were also some things there that were part of some juvenile reforms to make sure that when individuals are going through the juvenile system, their education doesn't stop, so that we're just encouraging them to go to crime because they haven't gotten a good education. They don't know what else to do. I think that's ridiculous. There's some things in there about how we can change the law with regard to people that evade. You know, if we're not going to have police chases, we need to increase the penalties for people that run away or that flee from police. There's several things that we can do there, and people are free to go to ashcroftformissouri.com and look at our red print plank on public safety. You
mentioned education for juveniles in prison. I know in Kansas City, the Metropolitan Crime Commission has the Second Chance program where they help ex-convicts who have served their time get back out in the community. Would you support those types of programs?
Oh, I'm very much in favor of doing things like that, but you also have to start those while they're in prison. You know, one of the problems we have is we're incentivizing people not to get rehabilitated. We're incentivizing people not to get training so that they can have a law-abiding job when they leave prison. We're just kicking them out, and then what else do they do? Part of what we did was looking at saying you're going to get out of prison faster, not only if you're well behaved, but if you learn a certain skill, if you work with one of the companies around our state, and there are a ton of them that are looking to hire individuals with those skills, and maybe also if you move, say, 50 miles away from where you committed your crime, so that we'll get you, because frequently what we find is it's friends, it's people they drink with or something like that that got them into trouble in the first place. So there's a lot that can be done, but you've got to start that work while they're still in prison. Right now, a lot of times they're just getting kicked out without that, and that's why in Missouri they return 8 to 9 times on average to prison.
Bottom line, what sets you apart from the other two Republicans?
I'm the only one with the record of actually getting conservative policy done as Secretary of State. We look at what we did with elections, moved us from being ranked 11th in the nation to being in the top 3 according to the Heritage Foundation. Look what we've done in the securities area where we're the lone state pushing back against that woke ESG liberal agenda, but doing it in a small government way that allows people to make their own decisions. I'm the only one that can tell the truth in my campaign ads. I don't have to lie about China. My other elected opponents, they actually voted to sell our land to our enemies and to countries like China. I'm the only one that's fought against it. So people want a true conservative that's been conservative both in the odd-numbered years and the even-numbered years. I'm their guy.
All right, Secretary Ashcroft, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.